Hi again. William Schnell, 30 years a Watchtower slave. He's now gone back to America. This is the late 20s and early 30s. He's talking about the move that Mr. Rutherford made to get a zealous and devoted core for Jehovah's Witnesses, the pioneer. And they were poorly paid. Schnell was poorly paid, and all of them were, and so some did not endure, but the ones that did were tough. He talks about that now. The pioneer days. When I joined our family pioneer group, we had 2 cars. I have always been a good salesman, and before long I sold about 30 to 35 books a day. We soon found out that money was scarce in the country, especially among the farmers. This is the time just around the start of the Depression. This led us to develop a typical business approach. When we came to a new territory, we first visited a dealer, preferably one who had a grocery store and a gas station. We would tell him about our preaching work and tactfully explain that we accepted produce in lieu of money for our books. We would exchange a number of books for gas and groceries and some cash. Usually we found an easy mark rather quickly. With such a system arranged, we picked our counties according to the produce available and worked them during seasons when these were marketable. For example, we arrived in Greene County, North Carolina, during the tobacco harvesting season. This, by the way, was the only time these sharecroppers had money. And in a few short weeks, we sold hundreds of books. In order to help the pioneers who would follow the next year, we recorded all the salient information on our territory assignment. Once in a while, we got stuck. Then we had to improvise. Often we had 3 or 4 crates of eggs, which the dealer could not take, or perhaps some bags of pecans or cages of chickens. These I would take then to some of the larger towns and peddle them to people on Saturdays. In Georgia, at one time, we got into a county to which the foxes had said good night and in which there was literally nothing to trade. Everyone was on relief. It looked like we would have to pull up stakes and go to another county. We hated to do that, as it took considerable money to travel from one place to another, since we never worked adjoining counties. I suggested we make a 2-day reconnaissance trip through the territory and check carefully before giving up. Soon I began to notice 1 or 2 old cars in almost every backyard. An idea hit me. I examined the wrecks and found most of them to contain their old batteries and often the nickel-plated radiators. I returned to the county seat and made a deal with the garage man. We promised to deliver to him old batteries for 30 cents apiece and radiators for 80 cents each. With these arrangements completed, we soon sold 25 books a day, accepting batteries for 25 cents and radiators for 75 cents in exchange for our books at the rate of 25 cents a copy. You should have seen the faces of those poor Georgia farmers when we offered them 1 of our books for a battery and 3 books for a radiator. They thought we were a bit touched in the head. They gladly accepted the books, for they said they now had plenty of time for book learning. So here again we accomplished the Society's main purpose of piling up huge piles of books in the homes of the people for indoctrination, and also financed ourselves. On another occasion in Missouri, the rear axle of my car broke. Since the axle had to come from St. Louis, and I had only 50 cents in my pocket, I pledged my car for security to the garage man who had to order the axle. I set out the very day to visit the business district of the town, and 8 hours of concentrated work, I sold every book I had, taking in $19.40 in contributions. Thus I had the money long before my axle arrived for St. Louis and was installed. Tragedy. And he has a question mark after tragedy. Tragedy hit us in Caroline County, Maryland, on the Chesapeake Peninsula in September 1934. We were stationed in an old churchyard under a huge oak tree. A hurricane blew in from the Cape and raged for 2 days, accompanied by incessant rain. In the forenoon of the second day, my nephew and I were seated on the front seat of our car reading. I was, strangely enough, reading the book of Job, when suddenly I noticed the branches of the old oak beginning to touch the car. That seemed very odd, as the lowest branches were about 15 feet from the ground. I suddenly realized that the tree was slowly falling towards the trailer in which sat my father, sister, and brother-in-law. I jumped out of the car, ran to the trailer, threw the door open, and yelled, "The tree is falling on the trailer. Get out!" Having done that, I raced back to the car, started the motor, and got it cleared just in time. The tree fell with full impact on our trailer and smashed it completely. All our belongings were squashed under the tree. We spent the night in the old church. There actually were bats and owls in the belfry that night, making it for us, with the wind still howling and the rain still falling, coupled with the disturbing experiences of the day, one nightmare of a night. The next day we visited a man who owned an idle and unused gas station situated on a fine tract of pine woods. The man who owned it was, in our book, a rabid religionist who had asked us to leave his property when we had come to sell him books. He had absolutely no use for Jehovah's Witnesses, he said, and thus we were naturally hesitant about going to see him. To our surprise, knowledge of our misfortune had preceded us, and instead of meeting a scowling farmer, we met a very sympathetic one, who at once offered us the use of the station free of any charge. He directed us to a lumber yard where we made a deal for all the material we needed for rebuilding the trailer. My father immediately set to rebuilding the trailer, while my brother-in-law and myself worked day and night selling books. We sold enough books not only to pay for the material, but also for our keep during those 6 weeks we were stalled there. Besides, when we finally left the county, we had a fancy balance of $90. Instead of appreciating the fine Christian qualities of these good people of Caroline County, who had learned of our plight and who generously and sympathetically supported us by buying books from us in almost every home, which they would not have done under ordinary circumstances, we felt kind of heroic, thinking we had put one over on the Egyptians, to use Watchtower double talk, taking spoils from them. This was unfortunately the general attitude of most pioneers and those of the congregations who went out working in those years. I have now given a running account of some of the highlights of our early experiences as pioneers. They were not extraordinary. We had them in common with all pioneers who lasted through this entire Watchtower intermezzo. The pioneers were an intrepid group of men and women who, while not pioneers for Christianity, were the true pioneers of the coming Watchtower Theocracy of 1938. They laid the groundwork for the most totalitarian organization which was ever spawned in liberty-loving America and upon our freedom-loving soil. The idea of a theocracy did not originate in America. It originated in Palestine, was used again in Rome, then perfected in 20th century garb in Magdeburg, that is, Bethlehem, Germany. Next time, the pioneers are demoted. I'll put in a link to Organism versus Organization. The Watchtower Theocracy is an organization, all right, but it's not the theocracy of the Old Testament, which was decidedly an organism. So we did several videos on this some years back, and I'll put the first one on your screen. Yahweh's Theocracy versus the Watchtower version. See you soon.